community partner conversations around topics that are important for our community as we continue to grow and learn together. We are so excited that you are here again. I want to encourage you, if you have not yet had a chance to sign in, sometime sign in on our list. On your table, I'll let you know, there are green slips of paper, and we encourage you throughout our presentation this morning to write down some questions. And after our panelists this morning have an opportunity to present, we'll have a time that we can let all of you ask some questions before we leave. I also do want to make an announcement to our funded partners from United Way. We will be having a meeting right here in this room. I think Corey has contacted you, so stick around for a few minutes following our presentation. So again, welcome. Our purpose this morning is deeply rooted in United Way's commitment to a more inclusive and equitable community here this morning. And today's forum focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And our aim is to facilitate meaningful and constructive conversations around these crucial issues for us. So, given the current climate that I think most of us know that we're in, and given the sensitivity of some of these topics, we want to highlight the importance of being respectful for one another. We encourage people to share openly and honestly opinions, to ask questions. But we also encourage you to listen. In fact, we have 2 ears, 1 mouth. So listen twice as much as you speak. Be open to learning from one another and from our panelists this morning. And let's remain respectful. We are all a part of this community, and I know that all of you want to help our community continue to grow, to be a prosperous and a healthy community. So please keep all of that in mind. And with that, let me say that we want to thank our sponsors for sponsoring this event this morning. Our sponsors this morning are Denison University, Open Renewables, Owens Corning, and Licking Memorial Health Systems. And thanks to their generosity, we're able to have these kinds of conversations here in our community. Throughout 2024, we'll have an opportunity for us to gather each month. There's a whole list of topics that we will convene and learn about together. We have a wonderful volunteer community partner council made up of volunteers, leaders of our community. So if you're a part of our CPC committee, would you raise your hand and acknowledge who you are? There you go. We've got several around the community. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. The way our forum will work today, as well as throughout the year, is that we have provided our panelists a set of questions ahead of time, so that they have some thoughtful time to think about the questions, and they will each take a turn answering the question. We have a mic that's on the table somewhere over there, and we'll simply pass the mic up and down the table and give everybody an opportunity to answer the questions. Let me say, we have a wonderful group of panelists this morning. So these are experts in our community and in the region around diversity, equity, and inclusion. They are engaged in their daily lives in DEI, and they have a lot to share with us this morning. And so again, I'm so thankful that they are here with us this morning, our panelists, and I'm not going to read the entire biography. You can look in your brochure that we have available. We have Averi Frost, who is currently serving as the Executive Director of the Central Ohio African American Chamber of Commerce, Averi right here. We have Maurice Jhordan, also known as Rese to many of us here. Rese is with us, working at Newark City Schools, but also Reese is multi-talented in a variety of ways. So we're so thankful, Reese, that you are here with us this morning. We also have Dr. Brianna Johnson, who is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Leader and Scholar representing OSU and COTC. And finally, we have Richard Brown also, who is the Associate Dean of Students and Director for the Center for Belonging and Inclusion at Denison University. So with that, let's all welcome them this morning. All right, we're going to go ahead and dive right into our questions. And again, I encourage you, if you have a question, please write those on the green slips and we'll collect those at the end. Okay, our first question this morning is, and I would encourage you, introduce yourself or say anything you'd like to say on maybe the importance of DEI to you. But our first official question here this morning is, our understanding of the importance of addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion continues to expand. For many, these terms can be confusing, or may be misunderstood. How do you define DEI or add to it, such as including justice, belonging, or anti-racism, for those who are unfamiliar with what it means? So we'll start with you, Averi.
All right. Well, good morning. All right. Again, my name is Averi Frost. I serve as Executive Director of the African American Chamber of Commerce for Central Ohio. And also, just a side note, I lived in this county for 4 years as a Denison student. So graduated, graduated some years ago. Anyways, for me, DEI, as we call it, it's more of a concept rather than specific like definitions of the words, because each word goes to the mass calculation to what we were really talking about, which is really for me, DEI is about ensuring equitable access to opportunity, right? And making sure that everyone has access to the same things. That's really, for me, it's the equity piece, right? Diversity and inclusion are fairly easy to achieve, but equity is really where I hone in as far as DEI work.
Okay, hello. So again, I'm Maurice Jhordan and a local school teacher, and I've grown up in this community, originally from Akron, Ohio. But I also grew up in Alabama as well. So how does that work? So I'm from Akron. My grandpa was here in Newark, and every single summer I came either to Newark or I went to Huntsville, Alabama. And as a result of that, I have a multi-tiered experience growing up. So I think when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what I try to focus on is finding a way to make it relatable to people on both sides. Until all of us see the value in it, it's not going to necessarily change. And the change is important because we all have a wealth of experience, and a lot of times the divisions that we have or the preconceived notions we have are not even real things. Like when I would bring a friend of mine from Akron, the inner city, West Side, representing, to Alabama, and I'd be like, hey, it's time for breakfast. You know, what's for breakfast? SOS. Yeah, I bet many of you know what that is, right? So they're like, what? You know what I mean? How do you have, what is that? And why is it served on a shingle? And then they'll sit there and look at each other like, no, you go down, you go down, you go down. And then when they get down, they're like, oh, wait, it's just cream hamburger. Like, we call it cream hamburger. In Alabama, they call it SOS. And it's the same exact thing. And there's so many things like that that we build up in ourselves. And we kind of stand in our own ways, in our own way when it comes to that. And like she said, the equity piece is important. And that's important because we have to show each side the value of that, of what that's going to do for all of us.
Good morning, everyone. I often say that I'm I was raised in a Black church faith tradition, so I'm used to like a preacher saying, "Amen," and everyone else responding, "Yeah." So same is true for good morning. I'm used to people, "Oh yeah, good morning back at you." I am not from Lincoln County, so this SOS thing, I am still very confused about. I was born and raised in Chicago. Chicago is home for me. And I've been here in Lincoln County and Columbus area for the past 2 years or so. So I approach DEI things from an education lens. I work in higher education, have worked in higher education for the past 13 years or so. So I see DEI or DEIB or DEIJ or DEI, whatever how we phrase it at different institutions, as a space for learning. And then the second part of that is a space for support for those folks who may feel others sometimes. So as a person, as a Black man who grew up in spaces, who went to high schools, went to college spaces that did not always affirm who I was. I didn't see pictures of myself or people like me on the wall. I didn't see myself in literature or in our books. So I approach DEI from those two lenses. One, education for all of us. I'm learning every day. I worked in DEI spaces for over a decade, and I still don't consider myself an expert. I'm learning. I think we all have a chance to learn there. And the second part is creating space for support, for belonging, for those folks who don't always see themselves reflected in the spaces that they occupy.
Thank you. Good morning again, everyone. I'm Brianna Johnson. Happy to be here with you all and excited for our conversation today. So as was mentioned, I work at Ohio State Newark and Central Ohio Technical College, leading their DEI efforts, and have been doing so for just about 2 years now. And I've been in the Central Ohio area for about 3.5 years. So I also have been lived in a lot of different places. I've been the new kid at school a lot. And so I think for me, I didn't choose, this area of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It seemed to have chosen me. I think just based on my life experiences of moving around different places with my family as, family parent jobs changed and those kinds of things. I was always the new kid. And so I felt what it was to be not quite feeling like I was fully on the inside or kind of feeling on the margins. And I think growing up, I thought that was maybe just because I was new and everyone had been at this school for a long time, right? But as I learned more, and as Richard was talking about education, I realized that it wasn't necessarily just because I was new, but it was because I wasn't necessarily represented in the spaces that I was in for school. And so as I kind of learned more about that, it really became a deep area of interest for me. And so for me, defining what this project of diversity, equity, and inclusion is all about, it's making sure that no one feels like they're on the margins of anything, whether that's any sector of society, whether that's in an organization, in a community, making sure that everyone feels like they're included, that they're valued, and they're at the center and feeling like it belongs to them.
Thank you. A great way to get started. And I heard some words, access, having equal access. We all want equal access. And the word otherness, none of us wants to be othered. We all want to be a part of something. So thank you as we begin our conversations here. Our next question is, how do you make the case for DEI for that work, and to those who may think that it's unnecessary or irrelevant, and what data or talking points can we use to support the need for DEI locally?
All right, I'll start with the second part because it's way easier. Honestly, you have to be data-based, right? Understand who's in your community and like the wholeness of it, economics, education, religions, like really understand who makes up the profile, right? And then take a look at how everybody's doing compared to each other. And you're gonna see where the opportunities are to put in some hard work and make some changes, right? Once you see the data. A lot of times we're going based on what we think, as he was mentioning, right? Like we just have these preconceived notions. And like sometimes people might think, I think about this all the time. They'll say, Lincoln County's not that diverse. Lincoln County's incredibly diverse. When you think about the range of types of incomes and all types of stuff, and so diversity is not necessarily just racially based. But the fact that it is often racially based is why it becomes a third rail, right? And then we can't have, I feel like we don't always have true conversations about it, because to talk about DEI in real life, you have to talk about history. And that is where we start to have differences, because we all kind of sometimes see the history differently, right? And so without going all the way down that path, I think it's really what I say to folks who feel like it's unnecessary is that clearly it's not. You have homeless people. You have people who aren't getting through the educational system. You have people who are struggling through the medical system. Like, you can look at different places and show and tell. And then, but what I think the case is, you have to make it relevant to them, right? How do you, like he was saying, how do you come from their lens and make it easier to understand? I think until you make it's relative to you, it's hard to truly understand. But like for me and us, probably, I can't speak for everybody, this is my life. Like, this is just by nature of who I am. I have to walk around understanding the DEI space. I have to understand how other people think, because as an other, all of the time, we have to constantly think about how we interact with other people, more so than other people have to think about how they interact with us. Right, so that's something to think about.
Okay, yeah, these questions are pretty tough to tackle. So how, for those who think it's unnecessary or irrelevant, we have to let them know that it's very relevant. Here in Licking County in Newark, if you don't have more diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's going to continue to lead to the same problems that we've been having for a long time in this community. Like, I'm a teacher at Newark City Schools. There's a number of Black students at my school and other schools in Newark City. And there's a lot of teachers who don't understand the culture of those Black students. And the Black students don't understand the culture of the white teachers. And there's a disconnect because certain things can be taken a certain way just based off assumption. Where if a student walks into the classroom and then a teacher says, so-and-so has an attitude today. Well, his attitude in my world is just him. He's feeling himself today. He's like in a good mood, but he's got this bravado. But if you don't know what that means, if you don't know what that looks like, then it's going to create a disconnect. And then that disconnect is going to grow and expound itself as the year continues to be further and further apart. If you want to get along with each other, you have to understand each other. And you also have to understand that a person's culture is what they believe is right. So it makes sense to me that we come to school and we do our schoolwork and we try our best to get good grades and to compete as best we can. That only makes sense to me now. When I was a kid growing up in Akron, Ohio, in the inner city, I didn't know what the value of education was for. I didn't know what it was for. Like, what could it do for me? For me, the concept was, so if I do good now, in about 14 years, I can get a job and make decent money. So I have to get through school, through college, through the masters, and then maybe I can get some Air Jordans. Like, no, not gonna do that. I don't even care about that. That's too far down the road. And so I think when we talk about what's necessary, and I'll probably say it again as we go down through these other questions, we have to let the people that are a part of the dominant culture understand that to get rid of some of the problems that you see over and over again, it's necessary on both sides to figure out what's wrong. If you see these kids of color in Newark City schools continuing to have these same kinds of problems and attitudes, and that even goes for kids that are not of color that adopt the hip hop and popular culture of those parts of Black culture. We have to figure out and understand each other better, and you can eliminate these problems. And a lot of times I think people think it's impossible, but then I remind them that I'm an example of that. You know, I'm a real inner city kid that was lucky enough to have a small town in the summer and super country. I'm talking about frog gigging and all this other stuff. I was lucky enough to have that, but I'm an example of that. Like I'm a walking example of a person who has made that transition. And it's a benefit, I think, to our community. I think it's a benefit. And a lot of other people can do the same exact thing, but we have to open those doors so that we can make those things happen.
Once again, I am unclear what we're all getting is.
From Chicago.
Well, when we talk about making a case for diversity, equity, inclusion work, I point to three things. The first is the business case for diversity. I think it was said earlier, I have been DEI my entire life. By virtue of who I am diversity work. So I always saw this work as just, as appropriate, as along the lines of what MLK would say. It's what's good. But everyone doesn't see it that way. So there's the other alternatives to making a case for DEI. And one of those is the business case for diversity. And the business case says that we are more profitable. We can do better work. We are can be more creative in how we address things when we have more diversity. I'm not always on the side of the business case, but there is a case to be made around the economics of diversity. I'll say that just to say that, to name that as an avenue. And for some folks, that's what needs to be said. The other is around inclusion and belonging. I don't think any of us, to Brianna's point earlier, want to create a scenario where anyone showing up for school or for work or for church or for any other aspect of their life and feel like they are a third party as something where they really want to be part of that community. So the second case is really along the lines of inclusion and belonging, making sure people feel at home there. The third is our world is not becoming any less diverse. So it's really important if we're going to succeed as individuals, as organizations, that we become proficient and understand how to navigate, and not just navigate, but excel in spaces that espouse diversity. Every part of our life is becoming more diverse, whether we like it or not. Everything is becoming much more diverse, and we need to be able to, as individuals and organizations, be able to thrive in those spaces, and not just diverse in terms of Black and white, but in terms of gender, and how women are showing up in the workforce in ways that perhaps folks are not familiar with in days past, in ways that people from queer communities are showing up in spaces, in ways that we may not have seen before. In my work, I work with first generation students. We're seeing more folks who are showing up in college who have not come from a family line of people who have gone to college. They're the first in their families to attend college. How do we support that diverse set of folks to make sure they're succeeding? And I can go down the line naming all the forms of diversity there, but we as individuals and organizations can only benefit from understanding how to navigate a growing, diverse landscape in every part of our life. I hope those three cases, or those three cases for diversity, help us understand how to navigate this.
Thank you. So I think similar to my colleagues here, I take the approach as far as making the case is first taking time to listen so that I can know where they're starting from, right? It does not help if I am making an argument that's way above or way different than their frame of reference or what they care for. So I start as listening. I love doing that over a cup of coffee or tea, in a small group, at a coffee shop, or whatever the case might be, and really taking time to build relationships with people, listen, see what's important to them, and then use whatever information that they share as far as their personal values, of, hey, if this is important to you, let me walk you through an example of how promoting, equity for everyone, promoting access to opportunities for everyone, that actually does help to meet whatever goal or objective that you might have, right? And then thinking organizationally, if it is someone else who's within sort of my organization of Ohio State or COTC, I love pointing them back to our larger organizational shared values at Ohio State and at COTC, we understand very clearly that we cannot consider ourselves to be an academic institution of excellence if we're not serving each and every one of our students, our faculty, our staff, and our partners very well. So if we are not serving everyone well, we can't say that we are academically excellent. So helping everyone who's a part of our organizations understand that, I think is really important.
Thank you so much. We have a lot to learn from one another, listening and knowing and understanding that we come from different cultural backgrounds. So listening, all starts with listening and understanding. But there's a lot of benefits to embracing diversity. Profitability is one of those for sure. A richer and more sustainable community. Success for all of us means success for everybody. So, you know, I thank you for that. Understanding our histories, you know, people bring their histories to the table. History is a great thing that we all need to dive into. So thank you. Thinking about now your own workplaces. How does your work, whether in your professional role or your personal experiences, promote diversity, equity, and inclusion right here in Licking County?
All right, so for me, although our chamber is based in Columbus, we're a Central Ohio-based chamber. And so part of the work that we do is advocate, and have hard conversations with people, whether it's governmental organizations, corporations, what have you. Let's take a look at what's going on within your policies and how you're marketing and how can we increase access to contract opportunities for all small businesses. Right? Because if you think about it, the types of businesses that are most likely to be able to contract with a large educational institution or hospital system might be a larger business. And so a lot of times small businesses, mom and pops, get cut out of the same thing based on the contracting requirements. But what we also know, and what I know personally, is that a lot of the contracting requirements are antiquated, they're old. And a lot of them were designed to keep people from the contract opportunities. And so if we are able to roll those back, everybody, not just the communities that I'm focused on, get more access to these opportunities, right? So there's on that side. But I also serve as executive director of an organization called Freedom Equity. So we're a community development financial institution that provides low interest, affordable capital to small businesses. We focus on the Black business community because I focus on the Black business community. That's just where I'm coming from. What we're looking at is how come our businesses can get traditional capital from financial institutions? Right? What's going on? And if while we're working to advocate to fix these systems, which is going to help again, everybody, we have to create our own entity to get this money on the street. Because we have businesses every single day who walk into a Huntington or a Chase, and I'm not shading those, I'm just calling some names, but who walk into these institutions and they don't have a relationship with their banker. They can't get a loan. During COVID, a whole bunch of small businesses, we all know that a whole bunch of small businesses didn't get PPP. That paycheck protection, including a lot of businesses in Licking County, based on the way that bigger financial institutions operated. So that is our work. So, and we are able to deploy this capital off of our own balance sheet due to our supporters and our funders. So for me, it's all day, every day, advocating and doing what we can to increase the opportunity.
All right, awesome. How does my work, professional or personal, promote diversity? Well, I think a lot of times, you know, living here in Newark, just by showing up, I look different than a lot of people at my places of employment. At Coldwell Banker, my desk is like, I'm never in there, but my desk is the catch-all for everybody. It's kind of like a running joke. But, you know, I'm in teaching, I look different than a lot of the teachers in my building. And the students notice that, because every year it's just like, so Mr. Jhordan, what do you do here? So I think challenging that, first of all, is giving people experience with something that they have not been used to being around. And then even when I play music, I purposely blend in all kinds of different genres and mega mix those songs together. I purposely go from Johnny Cash, Folsom Prison Blues, to NWA, Straight Outta Compton. And because they're the same exact chords, but they're two totally different songs, but I blend them together. I'm a large Black man that plays country songs. But people were, I think by doing that and just being like it constantly challenges what people have as their understandings for what their culture, what their beliefs is, or what their stereotypes are. So I'm always challenging things from that aspect. Culture is something that I believe can be deconstructed and reconstructed whenever we choose to. I'm a Black man that grew up in America. There's a lot of parts of Black culture that I really love. And my family had a conniption fit when I went vegan. What you mean you about to go vegan? You ain't gonna eat no ribs? That's a part of it. No, that's bad for you. I like this other stuff. I like the greens and I'll be sneaking some mac and cheese, but I'm not gonna do that part of it. And the same thing is true in white culture. There's different parts of that we're allowed to choose to be whatever we want, whenever we want to. But I think for me, at least professionally and personally around here, I try to be a moving example for something that challenges whatever your status quo or whatever your belief or stereotype is. And then we can open up a conversation. And a lot of times that happens, then a conversation can happen, but it usually starts with, well, you're not like the other, or you're a lot different than I thought you would be. You know what I mean? And that's almost a question that a statement people are afraid to say because they don't want to be offensive. But as soon as we break that ice and I say, yeah, I'm purposely trying to be a lot different than you thought I would be. And then we can get to the things that we have in common in this community, and we can find out, like I said before, a lot of the divisions that we believe we have are not a real thing. We do diversity and we love diversity every single day. Whenever there's a new food place that opens up in Newark, it's a big deal. We have Bojangles. Yeah, see, look. We just closed the gap right there. And so we have, it's not just one thing. And then when you go to Easton, oh my God, look at the diversity that we all share in. No arguing, oh, today I'm gonna do Chinese, today I'm gonna do this, today I'm gonna do that. We know how to do it. We just have to, and once you learn how to do something, I tell my students this, it's a transferable skill that you can apply to anything else. So once I sat down and taught myself how to play guitar, just practice, and then I learned how to do it, I can do that to anything that I'm interested in or anything that I want to be a part of. I just have to practice and do the work, and then the result will come. So I think for me, it's just trying to find a way to break through people's stereotypes, challenge those stereotypes, sometimes smash those stereotypes, and then rebuild from there with a new understanding this goes from both sides, you know what I mean? Because it can't just be from the Black to the white side and the white, it has to go both ways equally. And like I said before, and I always will continue to reiterate this, we have to let everybody know the value that gives to you, the incentive there, because an incentive is only an incentive if it changes behavior. And the same thing with a consequence. A consequence is only effective if it changes behavior. So we have to be really aware of that and incentivize it in such a way that it'll change the behaviors that we want to see. And that stuff works it works like clockwork in my classroom. But I have to find out what my kids like first. What do you guys like? What do you like? What do you like? What's your favorite thing? What's your favorite thing? What's your favorite thing? I get that. I get all those things. And then, all right, do your work. And you can earn this thing. It doesn't take away from me at all to share a little bit more of what I might make personally to one of the prizes that my kids can earn with their classroom dollars is a trip to Journeys to buy a pair of shoes, right? I wear only Timberland boots. I'm like a brand loyal, and I promote all that, and I only drink Starbucks, even though Stoss is better. But or if I say, hey, do your work and I'll give you a piece of candy, and I know half of those kids are like one little piece of candy. Yeah, not gonna do it. Do your work and I'll give you a king size Reese's cup with 4. Never mind the fact that I bought them on clearance for 39 cents a piece in that little basket in Kroger. But we have to find something that incentivizes that for all of us. Give me a reason to do it. And the same thing with the consequences of not being diverse. They have to be some things that change behavior as well.
I'm enjoying pointing out the differences between Maurice and I. The reoccurring joke that I feel like I don't know if he's enjoying it as much as I am, but I'm enjoying pointing out these things. But I will say, in this scenario, in response to this question, Maurice and I are very much alike. My sheer presence is diversity. My sheer presence is promoting diversity. Whether I intend to be a person who's advocating for diversity or not, me being present promotes diversity. The other ways in which my work or my presence promotes diversity is from an educational lens. I'm at an educational institution, so our priority in our work is education at large. So I get the chance to partner with colleagues on this panel and in other places to organize conferences that promote education around diversity, equity, inclusion topics. I educate students who are residents of Lincoln County in an interim for 10 months a year. Our work also gives space for students to do incredible work around service. I see my colleague Emily in the back from Denison to do really impactful work locally. So it's not just, hey, let's all stay secluded on this hill in Granville, but instead we're out in the community. I think next or 2 Mondays from now, when we celebrate MLK Day, will be a good example of that, where we're going out into the community to do actual hands-on work to improve the lives of folks here in Lincoln County. Again, not thinking about diversity from a black, white only binary lens, but seeing diversity in every other way that diversity can be exemplified, especially when we think about wealth. Our work really gives space for supporting people who may be from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, or folks who may be incarcerated, or folks who may not have the access or ability to advocate for themselves with the legislature, and so on. So we do some really outstanding work in that way around education and around just service, making sure that we are sometimes very literally getting our hands dirty, building, making, doing things for folks, in other ways advocating with the legislature or in other places.
I also work in higher ed, as I mentioned, and so in leading the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at COTC and OSU Newark, we were created to put structures in place to coordinate efforts that can help make both institutions a place where all of our students, faculty, and staff can thrive. Right. And so we do that by leading the strategy around diversity, equity, and inclusion, because our firm belief is that this is not something that happens by accident, but it does take planning, goal setting, metrics, and measuring progress, and making sure that we are course correcting when needed, right? Just like any other part of your organization or business, diversity, equity, and inclusion does take strategy at an organizational level, but also at an interpersonal level too. So we manage both of those things at our office, and there's a myriad of different programs, resources, dialogues, book reads, those kinds of things that kind of are the on the ground representation of that. The other piece that I really, really love is the community engagement piece. So being a part of conversations like this one, with people like you who have stories and journeys and questions and opportunities to engage and connect. Also partnering with other organizations, whether it's through board service or advisory board or volunteer opportunities to help shape other organizations here in Lincoln County that may not be educational institutions, but are still very dedicated. So I love working at the organizational and the community level as well. I also have an opportunity to serve with the New Albany community in their diversity, equity, and inclusion committee work. And so that's just been a joy as well. So it really is something that, like I said, I didn't choose it. It feels like it chose me, and I end up finding myself getting involved in so many different things, working with great people, and really having the base of everything be building relationships and connecting.
Wow. That's a lot. Again, I'm just amazed by the things that you're sharing, your experiences. While all of you have some things in common, I think what's important is, and two of you pointed out, you have a lot of things that are different too. You know, we look at one another and we just make assumptions. But every individual is unique and different. And Reese, I really like, we can construct and deconstruct our culture. All of us do that in a variety of ways. I think many of us might, just on appearance, look like we're all the same in some ways, some manners. But once we sit down and we have these conversations, like you said, Brianna, we have coffee and tea, we start to know somebody's story, somebody's history. You know, people are a mix of a variety of things.
Absolutely.
And that's beautiful. And then the diversity and equity and inclusion, you know, part of it is, you know, we inherit things, we bring things to the table that we've inherited, like policies, contracts, that each of us can be a part of advocating for changes. Because when we change some of those antiquated policies and contracts, it makes for an environment that doesn't happen by accident. It takes hard work, where everybody can have a place. So I really appreciate that. And then one other thing about that question that I really appreciate, and I was having the conversation just before we got started, and I think you said this, Reese, show up. And how do all of us do DEI in Licking County? Continue to show up. Show up, bring yourself and stay at the table. You may not agree with everything, but continue to show up. Hang in there. Hang in there. Commit yourself to hanging in there and having these conversations. Show up, bring yourself. So thank you for that. The next question. Commonly, people tend to associate DEI as being specifically related to racial equity or the LGBTQ+ community, but we know that a more diverse, equitable, inclusive society benefits everyone. What work is being done to support groups who may not be included in this generalization, and how might we expect our community as a whole to benefit from DEI work?
Okay, so again, I'll start at the back end of that question. So I think that it's about, if you think about it, and it is the business case. I know it's not always like you're supposed to do this, right? You're supposed to do this, but there's a business case to this. And if you think about the space and time Licking County has entered with all of this development coming, this is an important time where you can make sure, especially thinking about all the people who've been here. You all know people who've been here who may have not had the same opportunity because of maybe just the economy in the county, but your economy has just changed, like specifically. And so now you got to think about, I can't answer that first part really, because you guys probably could answer that better. How are you all doing the work to encourage people to have access to these opportunities, first of all? And second, we want to be part of that. Part of the initial conversations we were having is, I want to be more present in Licking County. Like, how can we be more a partner or a support to the businesses that are already here on the ground and to the ones who want to be here? But I think one way that I do see things presenting themselves, and that's kind of like a canary in a mine, is it's the certificate programs. It's the different initiatives and programs that are giving people access to get the skills necessary to get into these opportunities, right? They weren't always there because there wasn't a job on the other side of it, right? But we're seeing all sorts of programs. I know in Columbus for sure, like Columbus State and a variety of them have been putting together programs so that people can go and get these jobs. But even in my perspective, even better so, they can get these skills, they can start a company and they can go get a contract. That's what I like to see, because then they can hire people behind them too, right? And they can get jobs in all sorts of different ways. But I think has been an important way, because if you think about what we're talking about, these aspects of difference between people don't just show up like race and sexuality and that kind of thing. And so sometimes affinity groups are harder to put together. I don't see too many affinity groups of like, we didn't graduate high school, but we got our GED. Yay though, because you got it, right? And you're using it to get a job. But if that's what I'm trying to like point to. I don't see a lot of you don't see groups like that, because who does that? Right? But you do see groups that are self-advocating for themselves. And a lot of times it is based on visible differences or circumstantial differences. Maybe it is a new American, maybe it's a first-time college student. Like there are those things you see, but even in some ways, it happens out of necessity. Like there are things that are happening to those folks, and they need to come together to self-advocate. That's when you start seeing like groups present themselves. But I think it's more about initiatives that if you're really paying attention, you're seeing that people are trying to increase access. Like you just got to look and see how you can be supported that work.
All right, awesome. All right, how do we, when people associate DEI with specific to race, equity, or LGBTQ, the way that we have to constantly continue to educate people on what it is, and we can't let it just be marginalized and then diminished. So whenever anybody associates it with just those two things, because that's something that's trending, we have to let them know that it's much more broad than that. And we have to let them know how it relates to them. Some people may think this is unnecessary, and they don't even realize that it is very necessary for them. Everybody, I think, can think of a way or a time when they've been felt left out of any particular thing. So we have to elicit a person's empathy and constantly promote them putting themselves in other people's shoes and making it personal. So, and then the work that's being done, I think, to support groups that may not be included, I think we all have to go out of our way to connect with each other. Like I know this is my first time meeting everybody on the panel here, but because everyone here has a specific thing that they do, we can connect, and then we can kind of move as a unit to be more effective across the board. And a lot of us here can do the same thing. We can make connections with each other, and we can move together, because I think, as my grandpa always said, if everybody does a little bit, nobody has to do a lot. So I think we have to just continue to educate. We have to continue to elicit empathy in people, and we have to connect with each other, and then we can help make sure that DEI isn't marginalized, and that we can help all the people who may benefit from it get the full benefits, if that makes any sense.
My granddad also said, many hands make work light. So I agree that as many people that can be involved as possible makes the work much easier for all of us. In response to this question, there are a number of ways that I can point towards folks doing or diversifying our concept around diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I'll give one example of what we're doing, and maybe this could be a model for other institutions or other organizations looking to really do DEI work in ways that really celebrates the diversity of diversity. So at Denison, we've started this idea certificate. As was said earlier, there are many ways to approach DEI. We approach it from an idea lens. Instead of just saying DEI, we say inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism. So we have a certificate program that really allows folks to not come to Richard or Dean Brown, as students call me, to learn all the things there to know about diversity, because Dean Brown or Richard or little old me don't know all the things about diversity. I know my experiences. I can connect you to resources that help you learn about other experiences. So our certificate program teaches folks some core principles around cultural humility, how to access spaces and not go in and say, oh, it's all about me. Teach me all your ways and centering themselves in spaces, but rather how do we center others in those spaces. It teaches people some core language around identity related things, and helps us understand how to have conversations, how to engage in intergroup dialogue, how to create spaces where it's not always combative, but rather dialogue. That certificate program, non-academic, it's simply for like LinkedIn credit, for street credibility, I guess. It gives people a chance to learn and go to other events outside of my office, outside of what we do. There's an art exhibit at the Art Museum in Columbus around Ghana and its art. Go learn about those kind of things. There's a parade happening here. We encourage folks to engage in our core things we teach around cultural humility, intergroup dialogue, and identity related things. But then we connect them to resources outside of our four walls to learn more about religious diversity, to experience what it's like to worship in a synagogue or in other religious spaces, to experience food. I also would name that sometimes when we think about diversity, we approach it from a deficit mindset, and I really want to debunk that. So diversity is not always this thing of, oh, I gotta do this hard work, or diversity is the space of, I can't say this, I gotta be careful there, I don't want to get canceled. But diversity is also, man, that food sure is good. That food over there, they make some really, or the music is very different, I like it. Or they worship different, but I can get with this. Diversity is not always, I can't do this, or it's taboo if I say that, but diversity is also fun, it's engaging, it's enlightening. It's a way for us to experience life different than what we have done in the past. So our certificate program, again, centers a few core components that really gets people ready to go out into the world and experience diversity at large in other ways around other topics besides just race. Race is important, but in other topics besides just race. And I hope that can be a motto or a template, and I'm happy to talk about that more in the future, or you can go on Denison's website and look for the idea certificate. We just piloted one. We are piloting one now. We did it for students at first. Now we're doing it for faculty and staff, because it's hard to say, students, go be inclusive and just and all the things. And then their faculty and staff don't always get the things as well. So we created one now with faculty and staff, and we have folks, I see our HR vice president here, Janine, who is helping with that whole process, and will be on a panel for us to culminate that experience, to talk about, okay, how does this work on a organizational level? We've talked about interpersonal, we've talked about intrapersonal. How do we expose or talk about diversity related things from an organizational standpoint, from HR, from our academic standpoints, and from other areas? I hope that's a good model and an example people can probably utilize in their own spaces.
Wonderful. So at Ohio State Newark and COTC, as with probably many different institutions, we have a number of resources that we have now and that we've expanded to serve all of our students, all of our populations. So as an example, our Office of Disability Services, having a coordinator there that students can go to request specific types of support that they might need in order to access classroom education in an equitable way. We have our food pantry services and emergency grants that can support students who may be experiencing socioeconomic challenges, whether that be temporary or long-term. And we can also connect them to community resources to help get, support for things like housing, childcare, that kind of thing. Other things we have spaces on campus for meditation or prayer space, to recognize the religious diversity that we have on our campus, and to celebrate that, and to help make sure that people can feel comfortable in our spaces and feel that this is my campus and this is a place for me, that I don't have to hide or kind of find my own way. There's a designated place for me. And similar to that, lactation spaces and rooms, gender inclusive restrooms, making sure that our physical spaces are inclusive, because there may not always be a staff person if it's 9 p.m. at night, but people still need resources, and they need the space itself to make sure that they feel welcome there. We've got, as I think was mentioned, we have a growing population of students that are learning the English language, or for whom English is not necessarily their first language. And so we are able to connect them with free classes, ESOL classes, through our partner CTEC. We offer free ESL classes at our COTC Pataskala campus that students can access to make sure that they feel comfortable and equipped when they're reading test questions, or they're in the classroom. And then finally, just providing holistic supports through things like our counseling and mental health services, and recognizing that we are whole people. We do not just walk in and we're just employers or we're just students, but we've got all kinds of things going on, and supporting everyone's holistic self, I think, is a really important way of recognizing the broad span of diversity.
Wow, thank you again. So as we continue to look at equity in a variety of ways, we can look at the ways that we're expanding our certificate programs that increases access to all people, and talk about the growing economy, and we know there's going to be a lot of upskilling and a lot of adult training programs to be able to access all of the jobs that are coming to Licking County. So we can be intentional, we can do that work. That's necessary, because when we benefit those workers, we're benefiting everybody in our community. And Reese, you said something, you know, sometimes someone might feel that it's not necessary for them. Well, we all know what that's like. Well, I don't need to get engaged. It doesn't directly affect me. But what you said also is very true, that it does affect you. I think that's one of the myths that we continue to live with as we keep getting siloed and we keep living in this world, feeling that we can just live in our own world, drive into our garage, shut the door, it doesn't affect me. One of the tenets or values that United Way values is our interdependence, reality that we are all interdependent. And none of us can do this alone. So what's affecting someone over there affects everybody, and what affects everybody affects the one. So we need to keep that in mind. And then the other thing you said is none of us know everything. So thank you, Richard, for saying that. You know, we all need some humility as we continue to learn, because none of us know it all. So can we give one another some grace and realize that all of us have a lot yet to learn in this process? And then look at our outer spaces, look at our tables, look at our rooms, look at our artwork, look at our words, look at our signs, look at our resources. How are all of those things providing for a more inviting and inclusive relationship? So a lot of good suggestions. So thank you. Our next question, we're almost getting near the end here. What would you describe as the greatest barriers to equity and inclusion in our community, both on a local level and national?
This feels like a trick question. I'm not going there, no, I'm kidding. I mean, for me, it's pretty simple. It's this hyperpolarization, and how we're really divided. I feel like COVID made it worse, and social media made it even worse. Because we're only following people who are saying what we want to hear. We're not interacting with different kind of mindsets. And the more we keep staying in our corners, the further the divide gets. And it's like, I'm not concerned about equity and inclusion. I'm concerned about my people having equity and inclusion, right? That's where it ends up being, right? And then when it looks like somebody's providing access to somebody else, people start feeling threatened for no reason whatsoever. I'm like, that contract don't have nothing to do with your contract. Like, you still have your contract, now they have one too, because the budget is $1 billion, right? Like, I'm like, neither of you get $1 billion, frankly. So, but I think that for me, like, we just keep watching people go further and further into their corners. And in some cases, they even create their own social media platform, so that they can then go further into their corner, right? And then continue to just just spew this rhetoric, and the rhetoric is catching on. And then we got this bipartisan or two-party system, when in the country that sometimes we have 4 parties at a time, and you had a variety of candidates who like related to a lot of different people, right? So I think for me, that's the biggest thing locally and nationally. It happens in our region as well. I mean, like Columbus is more purple now than ever, but it was very blue with the sea red around it, right? And you could tell the divide. You go past 27 and you knew that you were not in Columbus anymore. That is very much a real thing. And I think that it does get worse. And I think that for me, the way that I personally try to get at it is I have this app called Ground News. And Ground News, they present headlines And then they have this barometer, it's like how many people on the left are reporting it, how many people on the right are reporting it, and then how many people are in the middle reporting it. And then you can choose a news venue from the center and read that article, or from whatever side you're on, right? You can go down the path, don't go down that path. I do like it, and then they even periodically, they post a blind spot. So based on what you've been clicking, you probably didn't click that, and here you need to read this, right? And so for me, it continues to like expand what I'm looking at, because I'm very dissatisfied with the mainstream media and how they're very like so in their lanes, and I'm like, does nobody do like moderate news? Like I just need facts. Let me get some facts, and then I can make my own determination about how I feel about a thing. But most times they're just telling you how to feel about a thing, right? And that's the problem for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, she basically said everything. I think adding, I guess, onto that, some of the greatest barriers to equity and inclusion is that we don't tell the truth about what's going on, about what we're doing. I mean, we're in competition with each other. That's the truth. I tell my students to get good grades and do well in school. But what we don't often say is, because you're competing with the person next to you. We want our stuff, and we don't always want to share. And if you call somebody out and say, hey, you're not sharing, that's wrong, you know, it's wrong. I was raised to share. My mom told me that it was bad if I didn't. But at the same time, I'm raised to compete. Let's just call things what they are, so that people who are not a part of the solution can feel convicted and do something about it. You can't hide behind these curtains and things that we put up just because you go to church every Sunday faithfully. Doesn't mean that you're doing good things in the community.
That's right.
Those are two separate things, right? So I think that's the greatest thing there. And the other thing I would say is we have to actually educate people and challenge their beliefs. I know some people who believe they are one thing and it's not even real. Race is not even real. We are the same thing. Cats and dogs can hate each other all they want. They don't have to co-parent. I can go anywhere on the planet right now and have a baby mama. Anywhere. I can do that. And that means we're the same thing. So a lot of these things that we divide ourselves on, I'm Black, I'm African American, I don't know, whatever it is this decade, it changed every decade. But that's only if I agree to be that. You know what I mean? Like I have a lot of kids at Newark City Schools who think they are from the streets. They think they're about that life. I'm like, my boy, you are not about that life. I have young white kids who think they are racist because they say the N-word. At best, you're prejudiced. You're not racist. You don't have any power to impede my progress. I can still do whatever I want, even if you say the N-word. That's prejudiced. And for the Black kid, if I'm offended by that, if I take ownership of it, then it's a big problem. But I don't know about, I tell them, I don't know about you, but the only time I try to go around or go through is when there's something in my way. This kid over here is calling you a racial slur, and you're picking him up and putting him in your way, and then complaining about the blockage. How about you just keep it moving? It doesn't matter. It doesn't have any power. And so I think that those are the biggest things, is we just have to be honest about who and what we are, about what's going on out here in this world. And we have to really work towards the solutions to the problem. There's a lot of solutions to these problems that we go on and on and on about in our society. There's a lot of like solutions, and they're not, a lot of them aren't even hard. But the thing that gets in the way of it is the fact that we're competing against each other. Nobody wants to say, I don't want the people to have more than me. And they ain't getting my stuff. I mean, it's cool. I want everybody to be included. But where's this stuff gonna come from? I don't know. Reparations is not a bad idea, but who's gonna pay it? Who's gonna pay it? You know what I mean? And we wanna know, so we have to just be honest and say, this is what it is. And if you're not a person who cares about diversity, then you're not as good as me. You're not as good a person as me. And I don't have any problem telling you that. You are faking the funk. You're pretending to be something that you're not. Oh, I went to the diversity thing today. And what else? And what else did you do? And what else did you do? You know what I mean? So let's get out here. I know it's bleeding into the last question, but let's get out here and, you know, do the work and understand that if everybody does better, it's better for all of us. I don't want anybody to be not included because whatever they go on to create and do is going to make it better for me. I mean, imagine if, I don't even know a good example. Imagine if Nikola Tesla did not have the opportunity to give us AC current. What the world would look like, or how much longer would it have taken somebody else to create that? Or imagine if anything that we take for granted right now was blocked from being developed. You know what I'm saying? So these people that fall by the wayside that don't have equal opportunity, it's not that they're gonna take away from us if we give them access. They may just add some more things. So I think that's what we have to do is just I'll reiterate again, be honest about it, be honest about what's going on here. Understand why we even need this in the first place. Like, why do we need diversity and inclusion in the first place? Something had to have happened that makes these conversations necessary. So at the same time, you can't erase that thing that happened from the history, but I just tell the truth and just put it out there. People were held back for a long time, and those things have effects today, and that it has effects in our society today. So that's what I think we need to do is just keep moving forward, tell the truth, and do the work, and not be fake about it. Put it all out on the table so we can fix it.
Thinking about the question, the greatest barriers to DEI work, I'll name 3, and I'm sure that there are many more. And of course, we all have our own perspective on what those barriers are. Consistent with what was already said, is a zero-sum approach to things. We think, oh, there's only so much. If they get more, I won't get more, or they're stopping my growth. I really hope we can work to debunk that zero-sum approach. It's not a pie, and if someone gets a little bit more pie, that means you're getting less pie. There's $1 billion out there, and no one organization can really do all the work to acquire that full $1 billion or utilize that $1 billion. So zero-sum approach is the first. Let's debunk that. The second is, because I'm an educator, I work in education spaces, I think a lot of times we lack the education or the knowledge about diversity, about other folks, about history, about current media or things that's in the media. We lack the education. So that's a huge barrier. And we are, like what was already said, sometimes we don't think critically about things. We take what we're told, we read inflammatory headlines, and we run with those things. But sometimes if we read the actual article, the headline and the article don't go together at all. Okay. It's a headline to get you bought into or to get you radicalized or whatever. So the second is education. And I would hope that we can all, as human beings, always grow and learn and develop every day. If we're not learning and growing and developing, we're going backwards as individuals. So learning is important. And again, I'm an educator, so I'm biased around this. Education, learning is so critically important every day. The third thing is, I think sometimes with DEI things, we think diversity is someone else's job. Oh, Brianna gets paid for that. She'll take care of it. Or I'm not a person of color. Or I'm wealthy, so I don't have any space here. I liken DEI to finance. Every organization, every person in the organization has some relationship to finance, to the money, whether you're getting the money or you're giving out the money. I like to be getting the money sometimes, most of the times, all the time, honestly. I like receiving money, but we all have some relationship to the money aspect of the organization. So too do we all have some relationship to the DEI work that happens there. All of us won't be educators. All of us aren't positioned, trained, have a lot of experiences to talk about education around DEI things. Some of us may just be creating inclusive spaces. We may be using whatever access we have to create space for others. We maybe make sure we're using language that's conducive or supportive of inclusivity of other folks. So I hope that we can resist this idea as well, this third area around it's someone else's job, not being that person who sees a house on fire and assume, oh, I'm sure somebody else called the fire department, but rather we are the ones who hopefully are all engaging in this and not assuming, oh, somebody else will take care of that. DEI work would never progress. And again, DEI in spaces of race and ethnicity, or DEI along the lines of first generation college students or women or queer or whatever, that work would never progress if it's always someone else's job, if it's always siloed. It must be an institutional approach. Like Brianna said earlier, it has to be kind of rooted in our institutional values.
Thanks. And to put a bow on this question, I would say just a 4-letter word, fear. That's kind of the root of sort of what we're all hinting at different ways is fear, I think is the biggest barrier. Fear of loss of power, fear of loss of resources, and frankly, fear of the unknown. So we've been encouraging throughout this conversation, get to know someone that has a different life experience from you, and you'll find that there's probably a lot more similarity than you would have expected, right? So, and having that fear can prevent us from reading the other articles or reading the other pieces of information from a different perspective, because I don't want to lose my my way of thinking, or I don't want to expand, but let's just let our guard down a little, not hold on to that fear, and instead think about, well, if I do have resources, we all have some type of resource or advantage in some category. And rather than focusing on holding on to it tight, you can't really receive when your hands are clenched as a fist, right? So think about, how can I share what I have to better my community? How can I use my background in education to help someone who really wants to go to college? I don't have to just hoard, but I can help. And if we can kind of shift our mindset around that, then pretty soon we'll notice that our fear kind of dissipates, and we'll notice that our communities and our organizations are improving.
Again, a lot of heaviness, a lot of getting real there, but it's really good for us to be in this space. Some of the barriers, if you didn't catch that, continues to be, hyperpolarization. There's this thing, it's either this or that, it's this or that. Can we get into spaces where it's this and that? Can we embrace and? Use that word more often in our sentences? It's and, right? At the same time, we got to keep it real though. We do have to be honest about things that are harmful. We do have to be honest about the history and the past and the stories that people bring, and believe them. Believe them. And then after, we're continuing to be honest, can we also, not just from this table's perspective, our national perspective, but maybe a global perspective, to be honest about the resources we have on the gift of this globe? Can we be honest about that? There's enough. If we choose to share, we've all got to share, do a better job of sharing. and not worry about somebody's gonna get more marbles than me. You know, we've been through a lot in the last 3 or 4 years, you know, COVID didn't help matters. But I heard somebody the other day talk about, it's like animals at the watering hole. These days, everybody's looking at the watering hole, who's gonna get it next, right? Because that's part of that fear, that's a part of the barrier that stands in the way for us. When we get afraid, and some of you, I know some of you are clinicians, work by not-for-profits, you're social workers, you know, when we get afraid, sometimes it's fight or flight, or it's freeze, right? And fear changes our brains. Can we take a moment to pause, to breathe? Stay put. Don't fight, don't flight. And let me, one caveat, unless you are in physical imminent danger, right? Stay put, breathe, stay put at that table. Because you may be triggered, they may be triggered. But can we give some room here? We've all got our triggering points, especially over the last 3 or 4 years. You know, and then think about what you're reading. We all know about media. We all know about those things that are out there, the algorithms, the way they're set up. We all know that. You know, and I've got 3 college kids. You know, I encourage them, read a diverse amount of articles, you know, and critically think about what you're reading. Don't just buy everything that gets you going. So this is going to be our last question, and we're at 11:25. And I'm going to ask our panelists to kind of wrap this up and leave us with something. And then I do want to leave like 4 minutes, and no way is near enough, but I don't want all of you to leave here just with the questions in the large group setting. Some people aren't comfortable writing questions and asking questions, and after we ask this last question, we'll give you about 3 or 4 minutes at your table to share what do you think are some of the barriers to DEI, and how do you think we in our community can promote DEI better to build a better community here in Lincoln County. So final question is, how do we as individuals work to promote and support DEI?
Okay, so short story short, I went through this leadership academy with this guy who I don't always respect. Actually, he was the leader of it, but like he said something that I thought was genius. He was like, you have to use the seat you're in. Like, use the power that's in the seat that you're in. Sometimes we excuse ourselves because we think that, oh, well, I'm just this or I'm just that. I'm not in charge of anything, but you are absolutely in charge of your desk, and you are absolutely in charge of your domain and your family and your community. And so you need to use the seat that you're in. So first of all, start from a place of comfort, not too comfortable people, but like, what can you do within reason, right? And then go further. What do you have the power to do? It might be scary, but sometimes we have to go through the fear, right? To get to it. But for me, it's just like, take evaluation of yourself. How much of a better person are you? As my new friend Reese just said, are you in this work, right? Like, and then if you are really in this work, don't take the excuses and don't take the easy way. We don't have the luxury of taking the easy way. By we, I mean me. I'm just using the royal we, sorry. And so I am implored and kind of almost forced to do this work. It is my mission work to do this work. But it's not, I know that everybody doesn't come from the same place. So take evaluation of yourself. How do you want to change your environment? How do you want to make your environment better, which causes a ripple effect? It continues to spread. Half the time, people just don't have a good example. Like, honestly, if you think about it, when people are like behaving badly, it's because they probably haven't had a better example to emulate. And so be that better example.
Okay, so how can we as individuals? I can just tell you what I do. First of all, I teach middle school. I'm an intervention specialist, so I work with behavior kids, and I've been doing that for 22 years now. So also I play live music in the community. Every summer I put on a music festival called the Street Folk Fest. 20 bands, all different genres. So you come there, you're gonna see bluegrass, death metal, folk, hip hop, everything all in the same place. It's awesome. Except for the time I did it in Granville, it didn't go over too good. The death metal part didn't, I mean, so, also I have a recording studio that's free to any kid from the East End of Newark that wants to record and work on music. So I do that. I raise money in the community, thanks to some of you that are here to put a disc golf course behind Heritage Middle School. We have all the money, like $6,000 raised. We're gonna put in a disc golf course and try to get that started at Newark because it's a sport that's growing and it's easy access. 3 plastic discs and get out there and play. And I think we need more things for kids to do in the community. When I was coming here for the summer, there used to be a swimming pool on the East End at Everett. A lot of people would not believe this, but there was a swimming pool back there. And we went just about every day. But that allowed me to be a state level swimmer in Akron, Ohio, when I was in high school, because I had access to a pool. So I want to bring as many things around here to throw in the way of these young people to help spur them in a different direction and awaken their, you know, allow them to be able to dream and actually achieve those. So that's what I do. You know, those are some of the things that I do. And I think we all should make a list of things that we do in our communities that we can make some things happen. And like I said before, we're not all gonna do the same things, but if we all tie ourselves together, we can make a lot more happen, and we can partner up with each other, and then we can find out how to fix these specific problems in these specific places. And absolutely, if you don't want your cars being stolen here in Newark, or your cars being broken into, or businesses downtown being destroyed, we have to find a way to lift the people that consistently fall into that path of life. We have to find a way to lift them up, raise the bar up. You know, when I got kicked out of Akron City Schools for nothing I did wrong, I got moved down to Newark with my grandpa, and my grandpa raised the bar up right away. Everything he ever asked me to do was like an invitation to a fight, but not really. I was a junior at that time. And plus he's 6'9", 300 some pounds or whatever. But, you know, he would fix dinner and I'm like, hey bro, I don't eat peas. And he's like, you're not allowed to not like peas. I wasn't allergic to them. And then he would just walk away. I'm like, what happens if I don't eat my peas? Like, you know. And now they're one of my favorite foods. You know, I didn't even know. I heard somebody else say it, so I didn't like it either. You know what I mean? So you just raise the bar up. People can oftentimes do way more than they think they can do. My students can do way more than they think they can do. They don't even notice it. I just raise the bar up. I got those kids doing so much work, they don't even have time to get in trouble. Yeah. And I just make it fun. We're just on go. And when they look around after it's all said and done, like, I feel like we do a lot of academics in here. Yeah. Yeah, we do. We do a lot. You can do that. Before, when you thought you couldn't, whatever you believe you are, that's what you are. And we just have to inspire people to be more, raise the bar up and be better. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be the best you can possibly be. It's something scary about it. When you say that out loud, I want to be the best. That's scary, especially if you come from a lower social economic area. It takes a lot of confidence to say that has to be built up. So I think we should all get out in the community individually. If I can do all the things that I'm doing, I have 3 daughters, 18, 13, and 14. I'm still doing some stuff to help the community here, and I want to do more. So what can you do? It might just be one little thing or whatever. What can you do to do it? So that's how we can support DEI in our community, is get outside and what Outcast say, get up, get out, and get something.
I'll also kind of highlight things that I'm doing individually, so it's not just, oh, you go do this, but here's what I'm doing as well. So in Chicago, I started a nonprofit organization known as Hope for a Better Tomorrow. that really pairs young Black men with positive male role models. Like to what Maurice just said, folks become what they see. So they see and only hear negativity about themselves in the news, in certain education environments, even certain religions say certain things about Black people. So if they only hear gloom and negative things about themselves, they begin to adopt those things. So we do some really amazing work around just pairing young Black boys, young Black men with positive role models so they can begin to see themselves as a number of things, including plumbers and electricians and police officers and lawyers and judges. So that's kind of the core of the work that I do. This space in Chicago. We do things in other spaces sometimes. Hope for a Better Tomorrow. Really outstanding organization. Some other things that I think we all could lean into is getting out of our comfort zone in some ways and learning about others. We spend so much time with people like us that we begin to have groupthink, and we only see ourselves, understand things from the perspective of the folks that we're around. But if we can push ourselves to get out and explore others, that can really impact our understanding of the world around us. Everyone around us is not quite like us as individuals, nor should we assume that people who, like I said earlier, who look alike are the same. It was a joke in the beginning, but Maurice and I are very different people. You may look at Maurice and I and think, oh, two Black guys. Yeah, I'm sure they got a lot in common. But there's far more probably different between Maurice and I than in common. So hopefully we can get to places where we're learning and experiencing life outside of the confines of what we're used to. And in doing so, hopefully we're approaching those spaces with a sense of cultural humility and not showing up in other spaces saying, I'm here, I am this, everything needs to be directed towards me learning, my satisfaction here, but we're hopefully experiencing spaces as someone who can be of support to people and not center ourselves in other spaces. The last thing I'll say, and this is likening to my response for the last question, we often think DEI is someone else's job. Oh, Brianna gets paid for that, she'll handle it. Or the Black and brown folk, they'll take care of that. It's really unfair when people who are already harmed by systems have to also do the work of changing the system alone. Some people call it the Black tax. You can call the woman tax as well, or the first generation tax, or the queer tax, or whatever tax. But it's really tough having to operate in a system that does not always benefit you, then having to change the system as well. You're doing your job and you're getting paid for your job, but also to go over and beyond, have to do more work. A good example of that, I worked at a medical school and now I'm at Denison. It's unfair to expect the Black philosophy teacher to also be the advisor whenever a Black student has a problem. A faculty member emailed me recently and said, hey, I have a student in my classroom. He just goes to sleep all the time in the back of the class. I don't know what to do about him. I'll name, my job is not I'm not the sleep police at Denison. That's not my job at all. I don't engage in sleep activities or anything. I'm not here to police people sleeping. But because it was a person of color, the expectation was, Richard, you may know how to talk to this person, or you may have some kind of insight, or maybe you can get them to act right. Let's get away from expecting or putting this unfair tax on people to be both who they are and to be the educator or the problem solver for all things related to their identity at their institution, especially when they're not compensated for being all these things either. So hopefully we can all lean into this work and see ourselves as part of this work and not just, oh, somebody else will take care of it. If the house is on fire, I'll call the fire department and not just hope that someone else is calling the fire department.
Yeah, these are all really great suggestions. And I just want to underline and amplify this idea of looking at your own sphere of influence. So I'm sure many of you may be on, let's say, a search committee that's hiring for a new position. Hiring is a great opportunity to say, hey, what are our policies around how we recruit for positions? Where are we posting this? Are we posting this in the same old places? Or, hey, let me just go through my LinkedIn and see who I'm friends with who might be a fit or who I know, or are we pushing ourselves to expand? So that's just one example of something that may be relatable to many of you in the room, is that when you are in an opportunity to create a space for someone else, take that as an opportunity or an example. Maybe it's not hiring for a job, maybe it's for, hey, we have this award, let's see, you know, who are we giving that to? Or how are we kind of evaluating what people's contributions are? Are we looking to narrow? And just looking for different opportunities like that to kind of expand how we are conceptualizing success and what is deserved. Similarly, education and not asking maybe friends that we know or people that we know to explain, but taking it upon ourselves to read things, there's several amazing documentaries that, you know, some of which are on YouTube even, that you can watch to educate yourselves and all of us about experiences of people from different backgrounds. To that, I would add sharing information, knowledge, and resources through mentorship or sponsorship of someone who has a different lived experience than you do. We all know that there is what's on paper as far as what qualifies you to advance in your career, but there's also hidden, unwritten rules and things, and everyone may not have access to that. So how can we share that information? How can we invest time in someone like Richard was suggesting? How can we invest time and share that information with someone who we may not have initially thought to, but who very much so could benefit from those things. And then lastly, we don't all have to be experts on everything. It's really impossible to do that. But I think we all can share and amplify messages of creators, of people who have different lived experiences. I know for me, I love sharing memes and funny videos with my friends, but we can also share articles that talk about maybe a lived experience of someone who's different from us with our friends, with our family circles, and amplify voices and content, and even support them financially if we feel so moved to be able to really kind of get the messages out.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Just summarizing just a few of those things again, if everybody didn't hear. Things that we can do individually. Use the seat at the table where you're at, your own spheres of influence. All of you are somewhere, you're part of other kinds of communities and conversations throughout Licking County. Use those opportunities, use your skills, your talents, your resources to do something. Everybody's got to do something in this work. It's not someone else's job. I forget who said you, not me, then who, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody. You're somewhere because somebody else helped you. Turn around and help somebody else. Pay it forward. Be a mentor to somebody else. I think Brianna just said there's a lot of hidden rules out there in the ways we engage, and a lot of those have been socially more acceptable ways or rules. Remember, we all have different backgrounds, we all have different histories, we all have different cultures, and let's embrace and find out about what are those unspoken rules of which people operate out of in our own areas of influence, and get out of your comfort zone. Push yourself, raise the bar a little bit. In your own areas. Maybe you're sitting at that Thanksgiving table with your family members. That's often the hardest conversation. Push yourself to have those conversations. So, we've got just a little bit of time. I am going to ask the staff to go around and collect questions. I'll have you raise your hand up. We'll come around and collect those. But while we're doing that, just spend 2 minutes. Each maybe go around, what's one barrier to DEI and what's one way that we can promote and help our community to further DEI? And then we're going to ask questions that we've received in of our panelists for everybody, okay?
You guys got a whole day of work off today.
No, we had it back to work.
Have a full day, had a meeting for this. And I hope he communicated that. When I first accepted this invitation, I said, hey, I have a meeting, I can't move before this, I'll be a few minutes late. One of those communicators. And then this, I didn't have a full day of activities beyond. It's a full day.
I'd say
We go from like
on a break where there's nothing,
Yeah.
like back into the fire.
Yeah.
Back in the space. One, two, three. Good deal.
Okay, so I have a subset in or just what happens, but I just teach right over in the East End here at Heritage Middle School. So
Oh, nice.
my two most energetic kids.
I like how you phrase it. It's the most energetic.
Yeah.
They could, if they just use their powers for good instead of evil, they could make big changes.
Did you guys try the breakfast? Good food?
I didn't, but yeah, I bet it's really good. Snapshots are good.
Oh, yeah, so Granville, yeah, it is.
Have you had Snapchat? Very good. They have really good food.
It's the way, I don't know what that little access road is between 16 and.
Yeah, I forget the name. It starts with a W.
But yeah, as soon as you go in the Granville, you pass the first gas station, you turn
Yep.
left, there's like a house, it looks like a house.
Yep.
And Lucas is he takes a lot of care and preparation
tell.
of dishes.
Oh, you know, Lucas is the person who works here?
He's the owner, yeah. I used to play music at snack shops when it was still over by River Road. It used to be underneath there, a little place underneath there, but he's since then expanded. And they have a location downtown here in
Yeah.
Newton too, for breakfast.
I stop off. Days I drive into Granville, go to the campus, I make them out for lunch and maybe for dinner. Never breakfast. It's never a stop in Granville.
Yeah. They have lunch and stuff.
Yeah? Oh.
Really good salad.
There's a breakfast place in Granville. It's just like down. If you really want like simple school breakfast, it's right there. You're gonna come out something like that. There's not a better place in there, but her daughter loves that. Yeah.
It's really cheap and good. It's not, is it all you can eat?
Some days I think they have that promotion, but it's a pretty cool review, but it's just.
Fabulous. Are you, and we're gonna wrap up for speech as well. If people have, or would like to ask some questions, are you open to that?
Sure. You're doing a 12 o'clock, another presentation at 12 o'clock.
At 12 o'clock.
Yeah, so I told them, and so they're gonna buy a couple minutes, but I'm not gonna speak.
Gotcha. So anybody who can, I appreciate it. It's so appreciate it. Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, I wish we could stay here all day.
This area.
It's really so exciting to see the conversation happening at the table right now. Some of you know one another, some of you don't. But to see you come together around this conversation. I will put a teaser out or an invite, a commercial out for Brianna Johnson down the end of the table. We've got the CIRC conference coming, it's the Community Intercultural Relations Committee Conference. How many years now? 13, 14?
15.
15 years. I know I've been on the committee for like 12 years. So it's been a long time. I want to encourage you to continue this conversation. Show up for that event too. It's
April 12th.
Well, so just around the corner, but also look for some of the other opportunities in our community and pay attention to some more opportunities to continue to learn and grow. With that being said, we don't have very much time. We have one panelist who needs to leave sharply. So some of them, though, have agreed to stick around afterwards for a little bit if you want to engage in some one-on-one conversations. We really appreciate that. I have a lot of questions that have been submitted by all of you all. I can't get to all of them. So again, I apologize. So I would encourage you to stick around, ask some questions. And I'm going to try to go through some of these. One of the questions that we received, what are your thoughts on the contradictions between people perceive of groups, quote, stereotypes, and one-on-one experiences, individual relationships? How do you approach these? And anybody can answer this up there.
So I think the way I understand it is, if we have certain stereotypes and we have individual experiences with people of a certain background, we just have to continue to educate each other and let everyone know that stereotyping, although it's somewhat natural to group things when you don't know all the information, but we have to continue to give the information and also promote to people that you should be seeking out the information. You should be seeking out, if you have a stereotype about someone who's Arab or someone who's Black or whatever, challenge yourself to seek out information and find out what more so you can understand, and then you can close that gap of that divide between people.
I would highly recommend the book, Whistling Vivaldi by Claude Steele. If you have not read that, a really outstanding book about this person, a Black man in Chicago, near University of Chicago area. And he would walk around and whistle classical music. So it's not to be perceived as dangerous, because he knew the stereotype that people had about large Black men. Really outstanding book to help us challenge our beliefs or our understanding around stereotypes. There's perhaps some validity there around stereotypes, but we limit ourselves and others when we limit them to a small belief on who they are. Whistling Vivaldi is the name of the book. Whistling Vivaldi. Whistling Vivaldi.
And let's put that on our website later, attached under our CPC, we'll put that title.
Claude Steele, I think is the author's name. Really outstanding book, really outstanding.
I want to piggyback right on that because one of the questions we got is, are there other resources that you would recommend, media or other, that would really be helpful for organizations trying to expand their DEI work? And that's one book. Do some of you have some other examples that you might recommend to our audience today?
Yeah, there's another great book called The Sum of Us by Heather McGee. And it talks about how basically this idea that if I am giving up something, or if I'm trying to help someone else, then I'm going to give up something in the process. And she kind of walks us through several different examples of how that's not true in many instances in our society, whether it be affordable health care or whether it be educational resources. I think there's an example about the labor force and unions and those kinds of things. And she takes it kind of from a larger societal economic perspective, but that's a really, really powerful book. An old tried and true documentary called Race, Power of an Illusion. Highly recommend that if you are looking for a detailed understanding of how race came to be as a social construct and the impacts of that in our society. I'd recommend a documentary 13th if you're interested in the criminal justice system and how racial disparities occur there. Another documentary, The Color of Care, looks at the healthcare system and particularly with COVID-19 and the disparate experiences of people based on their racial backgrounds. So those are just a few, and there's many, many more that probably I'm forgetting.
Can I point to low-hanging fruit for many of us or many others? I don't have Netflix anymore since they changed their rules around who can access Netflix in different households. I used to have Netflix, but Netflix has a lot of outstanding options in terms of, and many of the things that Brianna talked about, 13th and
Yes.
others are on Netflix. So if you're looking for some passive, easy access things, Netflix has many of those things, many of the documentaries that she mentioned listed there. And for many folks, it's easy to access. Not me so much.
Anybody else you guys want to say resources, documentaries, or anything? No? Okay, we'll get those titles and we'll try to put those on our website under our CPC form. So thank you very, very much. Diversity, you know, one of the areas that's on the top of our mind too lately is religious diversity. And I'm going to kind of frame this question in a way, in a positive way. What might be your advice on ways that we might start respecting religious diversity, particularly here in Lincoln County?
Religion and stuff like that.
I'll take it. I like the hard lines. Okay, seriously, I think the most important thing is to like encourage your sense of curiosity.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to go ask anybody and like, feel like you're asking a dumb question. Get on Google and start your research. Like you have to start making it less unknown to yourself, right? I can't make you understand that religious diversity or any kind of diversity is a good thing. And and for me, so I'm not an atheist or anything like that, and I'm not no heathen or nothing, but I'm not in church every Sunday, right? But for me, it's, there's a variety of reasons because I live at the intersection. Like as a Black lesbian woman, some religious spaces aren't safe for me, right? And so I don't always act in that kind of way, but for me, it's just like, I constantly have problems with people who say they're really religious, who are also hyper judgmental and prejudiced and doing everything in their power to make people's lives worse.
Yeah.
I have a hard time with that, so that's, yeah. Do your research, and don't be afraid to ask, questions, but then I think Brianna or Richard might have said it before, the onus can't be on the other person always.
Yeah.
It really bugs, the onus can't be on the other person, right? So during like the racial tensions that we had a couple years ago, and this is my job, I get it, but the questions I would receive came from a place and a person who didn't even do their first research themselves. They wanted me to be their educator. And I don't have a problem with that, but then after like the 100th question, it became kind of frustrating for me. Because I'm like, why do I have to teach you? Like, I had to learn it, I had to figure it out. Most of the times people are making us figure everything out, right? And so I'm like, don't always put it on that other person, but remember, because sometimes you might find the wrong person and they get offended because like, why do I have to answer this for you? Really? But that's not their fault. It's maybe just caught them on the wrong moment, right? Everybody's not always interested in conversation because of life. You might have just got off a 12-hour shift and you just want to go get your groceries and go do this thing. You might not want to have a conversation about religion at the Kroger, right? So like, you gotta just like, use everybody don't have common sense. Use your good sense, do some research, and then start having the conversations, understanding that you do have a little bit of awareness and it's less scary because you're coming from a place of genuine curiosity, and you can't make sure you ask the question in a way that's not prejudiced to start. Why do you do that? People do that. Instead of saying, I'm curious, why, I see that sometimes there are noon prayer services. Is that every day? Right? Like you can think about it, like reframe your own question. Think about your language that you're using before you offend somebody on accident, trying to ask a good question. That's kind of, that was a tough question.
Anybody else on that one?
Just short and sweet, for the religious diversity, I think, everybody who has different, denominations that they follow need to understand that, it's all for the same purpose. Like, I mean, if you're Catholic or Protestant or Baptist or whatever, and you all have the same Bible, you know what I mean?
Literally.
So we have to look at ourselves and say, what parts of this belief system am I adhering myself to? Am I doing that? Am I following the word of God, whether I be a Muslim, Christian, whatever or am I picking out the parts that I like? And you know what I mean? So it just goes back to that. I think religiously, we all have the same goal. We're all worshiping the same God. And if we can do that, also, who are we to say that others can't? If we have to look at the word of God and follow it. And if it says you shouldn't judge, then what are you judging for? You have to look at yourself and say, am I doing this the right way? So I think that's how we can close the gap religiously.
Anybody else on that one? Okay, the last final one. All of you are representing your own organizations, your own professional background, your experiences, but there are folks here in this room that are working at organizations. First of all, they don't have the opportunity always to participate in these kinds of conversations, or their organizations don't have an active or proactive DEI conversation or plan in their workplace. What's one thing that they can do to get that started in their own organization?
So I study organizations. God willing, I'll be finished with a dissertation real soon about organizations and how to help organizations be better. So I should be walking across the stage as Dr. Brown soon, hopefully, after studying. Fingers crossed. I think sometimes folks struggle with what they want to achieve in opposition to what the organization hopes to achieve. So if we can find ways to see, I think Brianna mentioned this earlier, that identifying the values, the goals of the organization, and sign what you want to that value or goal to embed the work, and not, oh, I want to do this and this is why I want to do it because I want to do it, but rather as an institution, we said that we value this. We value education. Can we get education on topics of diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, and so on? So some ways that may be achievable, and this goes to my point earlier of, oh, somebody else is getting paid for this, or this is someone else's job. Almost every organization values a sense of education. We did, before I worked heavily in diversity work, we would do book clubs. Non-threatening, doesn't call out especially diversity, oh, we need justice, but rather let's read an article together, talk about the article on a monthly basis. We'll find a new article, and the theme of those articles can be around diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, belonging, and include all those things. I see that as one easy layer of just finding a way to get DEI in. Again, tying it to the goals, finding where the mission, the vision, the goals, the values of the organization, what it says, and attaching DEI to one of those things by way of a safe book club is one easy way to do it. Or when I worked at the medical school, we focus a lot on retention. So too in higher education still, we focus on retention. And one way to retain folks is to engage them on topics that are important to them. So we can create programs that focus on engagement and make those engagement topics related to diversity, equity, inclusion. Again, DEI is not always, oh, you can't say this, oh, you don't do that, but it can be, let's go out and try some Indian food together. Let's go to this art exhibit about Ghana. Let's find the joy in diversity and not have this deficit mindset that diversity is always got to be some strenuous, hard labor activity.
Yeah, I think those are all fantastic suggestions. And I would add too, if you're curious on things that might be industry specific, go to Google, as you've all mentioned, and let's say you work in banking, right? Banking and DEI, put that in Google. You will come up with articles, videos, speakers that can relate specifically to your area. And chances are you'll find something that you can share with colleagues, your leadership, and say, hey, this is going to help us get even better at banking or, education or, real estate or whatever it is. And that can be that in. And kind of to Richard's point, it helps you to easily tie, ideals around diversity, equity, and inclusion to whatever your organization is trying to achieve, broadly speaking. I think professional development conferences are a great opportunity as well. You can attend them yourself, go back and share some things that you learned from that, and then encourage others to go with you. Shameless plug again, our conference, the CERT conference, it's hybrid. So it may not be feasible for everybody to come in person, but it's something you can attend virtually. And so those are other great opportunities to say, hey, come to this with me. It's, maybe we can only stay for half of it, but it's an opportunity for us to learn. And hey, we have a Lunch and Learn series already. Maybe we can invite one of the speakers from this conference to come and do a Lunch and Learn at our job. Because maybe there's some already regular opportunities that you have that you can kind of fold in and expand the topics that you're covering. So there's a lot of little things that you can do, and it might vary by industry, but it always just takes one person to start. And chances are you'll find that there's probably other colleagues that have that similar interest that are excited to come along with you.
Okay. We are at our time, and I'm very cognizant we have a panelist who needs to leave. But before she leaves, Averi Frost and Rese Jhordan and Richard and Brianna, I just want to thank you all for being here. Some of them will stick around and answer some of our questions afterwards. Also wanted to say a special thank you again to our sponsors, like Memorial Health Systems, Denison University, who's our other sponsors, Open Renewables, and Owens Corning. Thank you so much for sponsoring this wonderful opportunity to be in conversation. Please engage with us with upcoming future topics. Next month is very special. It is a not-for-profit expo, over 50 not-for-profits across our county. I said this recently in December. Not-for-profits are often charged with changing and affecting the most difficult challenges in the world. I don't care if it's cancer, homelessness, addiction, whatever it is, but often they're charged with addressing those issues with the least amount of resources and not fair business practices compared to for-profits. We need to support our not-for-profits. So come learn about over 50-some not-for-profits in Licking County. Get involved. They need your volunteerism. Tell folks about it. And then in March, we're looking at summer opportunities for children and youth. In March, I used to